I'm Tom Kelly. I have the pleasure of kind of refereeing our evening here tonight. And I'm particularly pleased to present my two friends here, Maestro Stéphane Denève, who will be conducting this week, and the director of the Boston Ballet, Mikko Nissinen. We're delighted to have both of them. Thank you. Permit us, Wilson. What you're looking at here is a magazine article published in Paris in 1913 about the opening of the brand new Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, which is the place where, in that season, the Diaghilev Russian Ballet Company performed. And the plan of this series of evenings tonight, and the wonderful one last Tuesday that I hope you didn't try to come to because it got canceled, and the one we're planning for next Tuesday, and the film we showed yesterday and so forth, is that the programs of the symphony for these 3 weeks, and particularly sort of centering on Stéphane's program this week, have a lot of pieces that have a connection one way or another with the very famous Russian ballet created and toured by Sergei Diaghilev. So we thought we would sort of introduce the idea. You may know more about these things than I do, but possibly you know this guy, who started off in St. Petersburg and created a ballet company that toured around the world. He collaborated with this fellow, among others. This is Igor Stravinsky, who was busy sort of making himself a French composer rather than a Russian composer, and soon he became an American composer too. You probably know what an amazing number of ballets were created by this man who, and our theme for these evenings is kind of crucible of modern music, put together into this white-hot thing, dance, music, stage design, choreography, all sorts of things, like Stravinsky's Firebird, the first of the 3 ballets that Stravinsky composed for the Rite of Spring. It was a pretty amazing thing. It's the first ballet with new music. This is a choreography by Fokine. Karsavina dances the Firebird. Sets and things by Bakst. Here's a Bakst drawing. Here's another one of the Firebird. And here's one little clip from Stravinsky's Firebird. You remember this piece, maybe. That's the first of the 3 ballets that Stravinsky did for Diaghilev. And the second one is this wonderful one about a Russian puppet. I'm sure you know it, Petrushka. It happens at a country fair. It's about a puppet who comes to life and he falls in love, and it's very sad at the end. And it has that wonderful music. Perhaps you remember this too. Goes on. After a gap of a year, then Stravinsky is invited, while many amazing other things are going on, to produce the Rite of Spring. So there's Diaghilev, Nijinsky, the great male dancer, and Stravinsky. Nijinsky, by 1913, is made not only the great dancer of the company, but the choreographer. And it's he who choreographs the Rite of Spring. These are sort of studio photographs of dancers in the Rite of Spring, assuming some of the weird positions that Nijinsky made them do. He was trying to make it primitive and ritualistic, and he succeeded. Here's some of the women, including one of the ones who was actually brought in from the Dalcroze school to try to figure out how to do this. And here is a sketch done in the back of the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in 1913 while the ballet was being danced. There was a woman named Valentine Gross Gross, whose profession it was to do real-time pastel sketches. This is the dance that the young women of the tribe do in a circle around the woman who is standing still in the middle in white. You can see her in the middle. They dance around her. It's called the glorification of the chosen victim. After this, the ancestors are invoked, the ancestors appear, and then she's going to be required to dance herself to death. The music for the glorification of the chosen victim, is the music that Walt Disney pirated to use in his film Fantasia. So if you ever saw the old Fantasia, not the new one, but the old one where Mickey Mouse goes and shakes hands with the conductor, Leopold Stokowski, do you remember that film? Well, this is where the dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurus Rex chases the other dinosaurs around. It's that amazing section of the ballet that leads up to, that begins with those 11 sort of hammer blow chords. Maybe you remember it. That's the first third of that dance. It's an amazing dance. We're going to hear a piano version of that later tonight when we hear the whole second part of the Rite of Spring in its version for two pianos. Stravinsky had these three ballets in a row, and Stravinsky is a great creator of his own history. He had this to say about how he created the Rite of Spring.
The idea of a Saturday printemps came to me while I was still composing the third. I had dreamed a scene of pagan ritual in which a chosen sacrificial virgin dances herself to death. This vision was not accompanied by concrete musical ideas, however, and I was soon impregnated with another and purely musical conception that began quickly to develop into, as I thought, a concertstück for piano and orchestra. This latter piece was the one I started to compose.
So he's saying they're all interlocked. The concertstück for piano and orchestra is what ultimately turned into Petrushka, which has a big piano part, as you may know. So he says, I was composing the Feuerbeuer, but it was not, and I had this vision of the sacrificial rituals. He's making the whole thing up. It's not true. Stravinsky makes up stuff because he wants to make the Rite of Spring his own, rather than a collaborative piece on which he worked with Nijinsky and with Nicholas Roerich, who actually Roerich thought up the scenario and showed it to Stravinsky. Stravinsky makes up stories. Stravinsky tells things that are not quite true. This is a sort of a doctored photograph. He was not really arrested by the Boston police, but it's a rather famous photograph. And as we're in Boston, we might as well show it. It apparently was actually a photograph taken for a passport application. But anyway, so Stravinsky is for many people at the center of the Russian ballet, but we have to remember it as being Russian. One of their favorite things to do was to dance the Polovtsian dances from Borodin's Prince Igor with a big chorus with millions of dancers on stage. This is the arch Russian thing, and this is the set that that Nikolai Roerich designed for that ballet. He who also designed the sets and costumes for the Rite of Spring. And there's a picture of the Diaghilev Ballet Company on the set of that particular ballet. This is what people came to see because it was exotic. Ballet, this Russian ballet, it was foreign, and it was even more foreign when it was the Polovtsian dances, which is distant Russian things. But this is the company that commissioned new music, new ballets, all sorts of things, and put artists together who might not have worked together. You'll recognize Claude Debussy in this close-up photograph. And there's Nijinsky, the great dancer, and you probably know that one of his famous roles is in the ballet called Afternoon of a Faun. It's set to pre-existent music. Debussy had already composed the music for Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun. Afternoon of a Faun is a poem by Stéphane Mallarmé, and it's about a faun, a wood sprite who is hot, and he's sort of partly dreaming, and he doesn't know whether these women he sees are real or whether the whole thing is in his dreams. At the end, there he dances with Karsavina. He makes what some said was a sort of a rude gesture with his scarf. Anyway, it's the first piece that Nijinsky choreographed, and he choreographed it with a special look. It's the piece that has that beautiful solo flute beginning. You remember how it sounds. It doesn't exactly sound like the Rite of Spring, does it? But there are more connections than you might think. These were the two avant-garde composers of the time, Debussy and Stravinsky. And I don't think Debussy liked at all that Stravinsky was more modern than he was. There they are together, pretending to enjoy each other's company. Who knows? They never had a theater of their own. Diaghilev, they came on a train, and there were descriptions of the Russian dancers getting off the train. What a sight. They came to Paris in the spring after the regular musical seasons were over, and they performed in different theaters. At first, they performed in the Théâtre du Châtelet, which is still there. It's a really wonderful, wonderful building with a great big space. There's what it looks like. They performed some of the time in the big opera house, now called the Palais Garnier, but it was the only opera house there was at the time, and you may have been there. It's a wonderful, grand place, grand on the inside, looking either way. And then in that season of 1913, the season of the Afternoon of a Faun, of the Rite of Spring, and of many other interesting things, they performed in this brand new theater called the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. Super modern, maybe you can tell. And this is what, one of the things is the balconies are not supported by columns, sort of the way the balconies here are not supported by columns except in the back. But these are short balconies. It was made with concrete, reinforced concrete. The architecture of this building is worth spending a whole evening on, but not tonight, maybe. And this is a picture of the audience, of the opening of that brand new theater. This is not the audience for the Rite of Spring. It's just people going to the ballet. Some of the things that Maestro Denève has chosen for his program here are things that are also part of the Rite of Spring, part of the Diaghilev ballet tradition, which is one of the reasons for focusing on that ballet tradition in this series of evenings that we're having. A wonderful ballet by Stravinsky called Pulcinella, which is based on, we have Punch and Judy shows, Pulcinello, Italian commedia dell'arte things. Costume designs and sets by Pablo Picasso, and it's that wonderful music. Some say it's the beginning of Stravinsky's neoclassical period, where you can tell he takes music from somewhere else and makes it his own with his own brand of wrong notes. It was some 18th century music that at the time was thought to be by Pergolesi. It may not be by Pergolesi, but it's nice music, and Stravinsky had a wonderful time with it. We're going to hear that later this week. Here's Darius Milhaud, the man who wrote more music than any other human being who ever lived. I think he wrote music faster than I don't know. Anyway, he wrote this wonderful piece as a result called The Creation of the World, La Création du Monde, as a result of listening to jazz in New York City. And it's a wonderful ballet with sets by Fernand Léger. And the thing about the Création du Monde is it was not created by or for the Diaghilev's Russian ballet. It was actually created for the Swedish ballet, the Ballet Suédois, in 1920. I think I'm in the presence of a guy who knows about these things, so I'm being very, very careful what I say. But I think it says something about the enlarging effect that was of the Diaghilev ballet, of the Russian ballet, causing this kind of creative collaboration to happen, not only in Paris, not only in St. Petersburg, not only in Monte Carlo, not only in London where they operated, but elsewhere in the world also. It's a wonderful piece that has these sort of smoky jazz kind of qualities to it. Maybe you remember how the beginning of La Création du Monde goes. This is Ernest Ansermet conducting. Don't you see a sort of, I don't know, smoky nightclub or something? I'm not quite sure. Also on Maestro Denève's program is a piece by this composer, Francis Poulenc, whose piece is called Les Biches, which might mean the female deer, or it might mean coquettish women or something of that kind. And it's sort of a drawing room comedy. Here's his dedication to Nijinska, Bronislava Nijinska, who was the choreographer for the ballet, and it's a ballet about women. This is the woman. This is the woman in blue. It has a character called La Garçonne who dances with a bunch of athletes. It's a drawing room comedy, but based on sort of Watteau's drawings of the 18th century things. And there's something called the Parc aux Biches in the gardens of Versailles, the deer park. But this is not that kind of biche. Anyhow, it's a wonderful, wonderful ballet with remarkable sounds. Maybe we can hear just a second or two of that. There again, you hear references to older music. Well, we have the pleasure this week of hearing a lot of those pieces, the Pulcinella Suite, Les Biches, La Création du Monde, and the Prokofiev Violin Concerto. What that's doing in the program, I cannot imagine. But maybe we could ask Stéphane Denève how these pieces fit together, how this choice of wonderful examples of creativity from the Diaghilev Russian Ballet came to be on one program.
Well, good evening. The fact is, I think sometimes music can be a travel in time, and there are some golden era, and as you described very well, the Ballets Russes era in the 20s in Paris were something really incredible. And I wanted to indeed maybe show what happened exactly in that time, because the 4 pieces we'll perform that you named have all been premiered within 4 years. Actually, 2 of them within a week, because the Prokofiev Violin Concerto has been premiered in the 18th of October 1923, and the Millau Création du Monde was in Paris just a week later, the 25th of October, Poulenc in January, so just a few months after that. And there is also an incredible connection with this institution, because Pulcinella was premiered indeed with Ernest Ansermet in 1920 as a full ballet, but the suite version, which somehow became even more popular maybe than the full ballet, was premiered here on this stage, which is fascinating, in the 22nd of December 1922 by Pierre Monteux, who was the music director, and the Prokofiev first violin concerto was premiered in Paris in 1923 by Koussevitzky, who will be also the music director of this orchestra in Boston for many years, and did the premiere here with the concertmaster of the time, which was Richard Bergin, just a little bit after, in 1925. And then, so that's an incredible connection between those two conductors. And anyway, the Mio piece was premiered in Paris by Vladimir Golshman, who also came here in the 40s and 50s to conduct this orchestra. So I found just fascinating that Boston has so many roots with Paris and with the French music. So I wanted to put that together. And this program is a Franco-Russian program because there was indeed a lot of connection between France and Russia. And Prokofiev, Stravinsky were in Paris at the same time in the early 20s, and so I thought it would be fantastic to put all those pieces together and try indeed to relate to this golden era in Paris.
We're all looking forward to it. Pierre Monteux, who was the conductor here, as you mentioned, also, as you know, was the regular conductor for the Russian Ballet for a while, and he was the conductor of the premiere of The Rite of Spring in Paris in 1913. He said he absolutely hated it. But that didn't matter. The job is play the music, and he played the music very well. He also conducted it on its 50th anniversary. The Russian ballet, all these ballet things. And Mikko Nissinen here is involved with ballet. He's actually, not only is he the artistic director of the Boston Ballet, but he is a historian of ballet. He has worked he trained at the Kirov Ballet, which is the place that used to be St. Petersburg. It's the place out of which came all these dancers with their training on the train to Paris to be the Russian ballet. And he has worked with historical choreographies. He's revived pieces of Petipa and Bournonville and other kinds of things. So can you say a word to us about sort of the role of dance in this music? Do you think that composers writing music for dance are aware of that, or do choreographers just get stuck with the music? I don't know. What do you think about these things?
Well, of course, in the Diaghilev's era, it was a glorious era where arts collided. Incredible music, very creative choreographers, mingled with the musicians and had more inspiring ideas with incredible scenic designers from Picasso on, and it was a sort of a melting pot of creativity that is simply an envy for the rest of us ever since. But the art that they produced was so inspiring, and as you said, it's very correct. Diaghilev's Ballets Russes didn't really perform in Russia. It was a company outside of Russia, and Diaghilev was a very clever man. He even orchestrated Václav Nijinsky to get fired from Mariinsky so he could have him all time for his company. And it's the stuff that dreams are made of. The creativity that Diaghilev's Ballets Russes did moved art form forward, moved the art form of dance into the popular culture. In Paris, it was the era of Orientalism. It was so fascinating. Sometimes in today's world, we have a hard time understanding how big of an impact it really had in a common man. And I would describe, if you would take today's Elle magazine and go through that, in 1911, 1912, Comédie Illustrée, if you go through the magazine, it's 70% arts and Ballets Russes. It was incredibly influential.
And that's true for the Boston Ballet, too. You're in all the illustrated magazines 70% of the time, aren't you?
We aim at that, but I'm sorry, I think we don't make those percentages.
Those pages that aren't dedicated to the Boston Symphony Orchestra are dedicated to the Boston Ballet in your dreams. Well,
Exactly.
I don't know. Maestro Denève, you were going to say something.
No, I think it's indeed improved the art, but even socially, because you spoke about Les Biches, and well, indeed, there is a connection, Les Biches, with Louis XV, who actually, when he wanted to have some discreet affairs, were going in the park of Parc aux Cerfs, actually, and indeed the Biches were in this park, the ladies that he was fancying, and but in this ballet in 1924 actually was showing some women with short hair, and also garçon with indeed a very new way to present itself. And somehow there was something very progressive. There was some also very risque lesbian flirtation in this ballet, and the women were definitely empowered compared to the athletes. They were making fun of them in this choreography. So somehow, even on a social aspect, I think that the Ballets Russes also had a big impact.
Yes, and actually, she was also smoking a cigarette during the piece, with a long holder and a cigarette. When I was dancing in Dutch National Ballet, somewhere in early 1980s, I danced the production staged by Irina Nijinsky, who is Bronislava Nijinsky's daughter. And for me, it was a dream because of all the historical things. But the ballet was really, it was like being in a different era. There was a perfume. It was really flirtatious. And Marie Laurence's sets, oh my God, they were incredibly beautiful. And I was one of those. There was 3 guys. We had a light blue and white striped. Sometimes we were like athletes, and we had to move in a very mechanical way. And Nijinsky insisted that there were double tours. That's the sort of a step where you go twice around and you land on the same spot. That you do it without plie, which means you don't bend your legs. And it was like, that's impossible. So you sort of try to do it as stiff as possible, and but a delightful ballet, absolutely.
And you know why they had cigarettes with red filter, the ladies. The reason for the red filter is to hide the lipstick stains on the cigarettes.
Yeah. So was the Nijinsky, your Nijinsky, attempting to bring back her mother's choreography, the choreography that we see in this sort of staged photograph?
100%. Actually, she probably would have not remembered the choreography. I believe it was John Mean from Royal Ballet, because Royal Ballet had performed the production about 10 years earlier, came and staged the ballet, and Nijinsky's role was to bring the spirit and coach the details. But I was fascinated. Wow. I was looking at her fingers, and they looked like Václav Nijinsky's fingers. They were very robust people, and fantastic.
No, I'm amazed actually that you danced that ballet. Yes. And so you can confirm that this big sofa was blue.
Yeah, it was blue. There was and in some part of the ballet the sofa was further down, and sometimes it was way up there.
Wow.
It was a really pink and light blue, very pastel, sort of a typical Marie Lawrence palette.
Poulenc's music is so sort of organized and classical in its witty way, it seems to me, that it's hard to imagine that he wrote the music thinking about the choreography that would go with it. Do you know anything about how he and Nijinsky worked together to put the ballet on the stage?
I don't know about those relations, but I really feel like the composer, it's better that the composer writes a great piece of music and the choreographer comes later. Often when people try to, it was the era of the court composers in the world of ballet, the classical ballet era of 1860s, where the composer was told, I need so and so many measures of this and that, and then eventually Diaghilev was one of the first ones who really brought the music to its prominence in the art form of ballet.
Actually, there are letters showing that Poulenc was very proud that they used a lot of rehearsals for his piece, and And indeed, they took it very seriously. They premiered it in Monte Carlo, and then it came right away in Paris because it had really a lot of success, this ballet. And you have to remember that Poulenc was only 24, so this was a breaking through piece for him. That's what really launched his international fame, and that was something indeed very important. It was a long ballet as well. It was not short. It was almost half an hour, actually a little bit more than half an hour because it's a full ballet. Here in Boston, we'll play only the suite, which is 20 minutes, but the full ballet is a little bit over half an hour. So, I mean, that was really a big deal for him.
Yeah.
We also, a couple of years ago, I did a move that I don't often do with the Boston Ballet. I bought the sets and costumes. There was a company that was closing down and they owned a production, and we have the costumes and sets, and just be patient, you will see La Biche on the stage of the Boston Ballet.
Wow. Great. I hope it'll be soon. I'd love to see it. I think it'd be a
It
wonderful.
seems, alors that's to be confirmed 100%, it seems that the Boston Symphony never played Les Biches. So that's quite fascinating that this may be the premiere this week.
This may be the Boston premiere that you'll conduct.
Possibly. To be confirmed, but the archive seems not to show any concert of it.
I hope none of us will miss it, and I hope we'll have better. It won't be as difficult to get to Symphony Hall this weekend as it is today. What about Pulcinella? I mean, I know you're doing the suite version of Pulcinella, but the ballet itself is rather a famous thing, partly because of its because of the Picasso connection, because of the Baroque music connection, and the little bit we played, but maybe everybody knows that it sounds sort of like that all the way through, and people thought Stravinsky was crazy to take Baroque music and play it funny. And yet, I don't know, does the choreography compare in any way to that? Does it try to reflect that same business?
Well, the original choreography is lost. Nobody really knows how it was, but
all we have is these sort of staged photographs.
yes,
Yeah.
there are several different versions of Pulcinella. One by Heinz Perli in Switzerland was relatively successful. Very famous attempt by George Balanchine and Jerome Robbins, the only ballet that they choreographed together, and it was quite an interesting project. And I'm sure somebody will revive that one of these days. I'm in a process of doing a world premiere of Pulcinella 2-3 years out with a choreographer from today.
Great. Well, we'll all be there. That'll be fun. And then maybe you'll do Les Biches the next night or something like that, and maybe you can do the choreography for the Prokofiev First Violin Concerto, which I understand was once choreographed. Is that right?
Yes, it has been choreographed as well, and it's a little bit tone poemish in a way as well. It's a piece that could be also a ballet somehow quite easily. And there is a very funny connection though that between Prokofiev and Stravinsky. When Koussevitzky conducted the very premiere in Paris on the same program, that was the debut of Stravinsky as a conductor. And he was, of course, immensely famous at that time in Paris. And so he conducted for the first time his octet. And actually, somehow it seems that this premiere as a conductor of Stravinsky overshadowed Prokofiev First Violin Concerto premiere. So that's once again a little problem that they had often between Stravinsky and Prokofiev.
Do you know anything about the choreography of a Prokofiev violin concerto? What's it like to?
No, I mean, it was an era where they didn't record them very well.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. Those are the two works that have been lost.
Yeah. We were talking backstage, and maybe we shouldn't bring it up here, but the people have been making efforts in recent years to recreate some of these famous choreographies. The choreography of The Rite of Spring, Millicent Hodgson has done some work on that, attempt to reconstruct the choreography, Nijinsky's choreography to Afternoon of a Faun and that sort of thing. I like looking at those things because it makes me think that I'm in the presence of all of the arts put back together again the way they were, because Stravinsky spent a lot of his time trying to separate himself from the collaboration he had done with Nijinsky and Diaghilev and others, so that it would be Stravinsky's Rite of Spring rather than Roerich and Nijinsky and Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. But as you say, Mikko, the choreographic sources, we didn't have a Laban notation in those days. We didn't have videos in these days. We had people scribbling in the back of the theater, and we have some choreographic notes on piano scores. The nice lady from the Dalcroze school, Miriam Ramberg, as she was when she began, whose job it was to set these. The question is whether we have enough choreographic information left nowadays to have it be fair to say this is Millicent Hodson's reconstruction, or no, I don't know. I love looking at it. I can never listen to the Rite of Spring the same way again. But Mikko was saying before, I don't know. Do you have a comment, anybody?
You know that's Diaghilev's fault, because he actually forbid some footage. He didn't want footage at all. There is only like a 30 seconds of a Ballets Russes original in Switzerland. I think in Montreux there is one film that exists, but that's it. And because he didn't want that, and it's actually in a way it's interesting because he was such a smart man, Diaghilev, in many ways, and I even believe that this was a very smart move to create his legend. That actually there would not be any footage that would show it too early, and that people could just fantasize about it and only remember it. So I think that was a smart move from him. But unfortunately, that makes that we don't have any film. That's too bad.
So it's on purpose that we don't have better records.
But, we cannot reconstruct ballet indeed very clearly because we don't have a recording of it video. But what is interesting is this place here, the Boston Symphony, is maybe the best place in the entire world to reconstruct the style. Because, believe it or not, I'm a conductor. I conducted recently the Orchestre National de France, and even in Paris, unfortunately, the green is always the grass is always greener. And so the French orchestra try to play Beethoven, Brahms, and Schumann. And in a way, this orchestra kept an incredible culture of the French spirit and music. And this morning, when I was rehearsing Les Biches here, I was very amazed that they have this very transparent way and a very flavorful timbre for the different woodwinds, extreme articulation in the brass section. And somehow, if there is one place when we can, of course we make it new, it's a live music, but somehow there is still a soul and a spirit from those days in this orchestra.
It's great to know, but of course there were lots of French musicians in the orchestra in those days. A lot of the people who played in Paris then came and played in Boston, is that true?
Musician who premiered the Rite of Spring came here.
Yeah, of course, Diaghilev was a mastermind of creating a controversy, whether it was the premiere of the Rite of Spring or Afternoon of a Faun. He made sure there was a controversy, because controversy meant the houses were going to be sold out. After the Afternoon of a Faun, there were policemen on the second show checking if it was decent enough for Paris at the time. And of course, the Sacre du Printemps was very loud, sort of a battle in the audience during the performance. But what has really remained of the choreography, it's very difficult to say. I'm so glad you mentioned Valentine Gross, because she has given us perhaps the cleanest illusions what the Nijinsky's dancing was. One of the drawings is from Les Sylphides, where you see the Nijinsky in the air, roughly sketched, and you see the distance and the sort of the feel of all these ballets. She is, in my mind, one of the most authentic records of how these dances were. But from Sacre, everybody loves the myth. Everybody loves the costumes. The music is out of this world. There's very little left. So I have seen the production several times, and I enjoy watching it because it recalls that era and that feeling, but it's perhaps not the choreography. It's someone's opinion of what they think it was. And kudos for them, it's a big work. They've reconstructed Jeux till Eulenspiegel. The Afternoon of Faun has survived in its original form, and Paris Opera is the company that has danced it most regularly. So when I brought it to the Boston Ballet's repertoire, we had Guy and Tess Markham from Paris and staged it. And now, even when we had a season in the Lincoln Center with some really contemporary choreography, I played them next to the Afternoon of a Faun because that was the first contemporary piece of choreography, and perhaps still to this day, the single most important piece of choreography ever created.
Really, I didn't know that that's the place, the Afternoon of a Faun. Nijinsky's choreography for Afternoon of a Faun is sort of the beginning of a modern ballet. I mean, of the kind of stepping out of the Sleeping Beauty kind of ballet into the modern choreography.
Well, of course, Forkin helped evolve that process, and actually the story how Forkin, because everything in the Petipa era was very academic. It was American in St. Petersburg in 1906 who was rehearsing for her performance. It was a young Isadora Duncan, and Michael Forkin was a very young dancer in a company and budding choreographer, and he was like anxious, like many young people, wanting the art form to be different. And he thought, well, can't it be different? And light bulb went off when he saw Isadora Duncan. I said, of course. And that was the inspiration for Forkin to move it further. But that still had more correlation where the choreography was before. Nijinsky was revolutionary. That was like, turn the page, start with a white blanket and just two-dimensional dancing.
He tried to, as I understand it, the idea of Afternoon of a Faun is that it takes place in ancient Greece, and so he used his vision of the Greek friezes done in low relief, primitive Greek friezes where the body is seen frontally and sideways at the same time, so that a lot of it is danced with the torso forward, but the hands and feet, legs sort of sideways. Is that? And it's a particular look that he's trying to create for the whole ballet.
Absolutely, and he succeeds incredibly well. It's to this day, I'm blown away almost every time I see it.
We're really lucky in Boston to have a ballet company that is famous not only for creating new works, but keeping in the repertory and showing to us some of these things that make such a huge difference to the history of dance. So thank you for keep doing what you're doing, and let us know when these pieces are going to come up in your repertory, because we very much like to see them. And Stéphane Denève is here to bring to learn some French culture from the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Is that right?
I mean, it's really going to the source here. Actually, I'm very inspired by the orchestra, by what's coming from them, really. So it's strange because, of course, you know, I used to come to the States usually when I do conduct French music with a little bit of a, I mean, if I may say that, it sounds pretentious, but ambassador feeling, you know. I try to defend what I believe is the right style of French music. But when I conduct here, actually, they teach me how it was.
I was joking about that, but I expect there is some of that tradition here. It is, of course, Koussevitzky who had a company called Éditions Russes de Musique in Paris. And the reason Walt Disney could pirate Stravinsky's Rite of Spring for Fantasia was that the score had been published in 1913 in Paris with the Éditions Russes de Musique. And you know what happened in Russia after 1913? Well, things changed. They had a big revolution. All the deals you had before are no good anymore, including copyright arrangements. And so any copyright that you had with some Russian company in 1913 was worth nothing. And so Walt Disney could say to Igor Stravinsky, "I'll give you $45." He said, "Well, you can't do that. This is a very, very famous piece of music." And he said, "Oh, yes, I can," and did. But of course, it's also true that Stravinsky rushed to make revised versions of all of the pieces that he had written, that he had published and composed before that time. Partly, he said, to make them easier to conduct, to rebar the sacrificial dance at the end.
There's no change.
There's so.
Basically no changes.
Yeah, right.
It's symbolic. It's just, but what is in the score, the manuscript of the Rite of Spring, is some numbers. And I watched very carefully the manuscript of it, and I was really wondering what were those numbers. They had nothing to do with music. It was calculating the kind of fee he will get. So yes, he was very smart for getting the new rights and getting the money for it.
Stravinsky was very careful with his finances. Diaghilev was very smart about money. It's not clear that he was good with his finances. He was very good with your finances. I think he could see to it that you paid whatever you wanted, or maybe a little bit more than you wanted. In the 1913 season, the man who built this new theater, the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, was Gabriel Astruc. He gave Diaghilev huge amounts of money for this particular season. And the reason the orchestra for the Rite of Spring is as big as it is because Diaghilev insisted that it be bigger than Stravinsky had originally intended. So I think he wrote it for a very large orchestra to show off how much money we're getting in here for each of these performances. And poor Mr. Astruc lost his shirt. And he was bankrupt by the end of the 1913 season. But boy, was it a glorious season, wasn't it?
That's another tradition that people are not aware of. Diaghilev pretty much went bankrupt after every season, and then he raised the money again. And even the big production that The Sleeping Princess in the early 20s that played in London a really long time and was a huge success with the audiences, but still financially it was so costly that it didn't make any money. And actually, interesting story, Igor Stravinsky reorchestrated Tchaikovsky for that because the Ballets Russes couldn't get all the orchestra parts from Russia. So Stravinsky was in charge of reorchestrating and did a fantastic job. So today when you hear the Tchaikovsky, it is the Stravinsky reorchestration.
That's great. We have actually a minute or two. We wondered, you're never going to have this great opportunity to have these two great musicians and dancers and choreographers and historians of music here. If anybody here in the hall would like to ask any question of Maestro Denève or of Mikko or of anybody, we'd be, I know you're not used to standing up in Symphony Hall and asking questions of the conductor, but this is an informal evening and a chance in which you could do so if you wanted to.
I'm glad you are mesmerized.
Mesmerized. Yes, sir.
Monsieur Denève,
Oui.
have you ever thought of trying to conduct these ballets with the dancing?
May I repeat the question for just in case? This man has a very good voice. Have you ever thought, Maestro Denève, of conducting these pieces with dancing at the same time?
It's a very fair question because all the pieces of the Ballets Russes were premiered as ballet and intended really as ballet, and they quasi all of them got a future much more successful as concert pieces. That said, I love the ballet, really. I don't say that because you're here. And I did, I think I conducted 4 or 5 ballets at the Paris Opera and the same in Deutsche Oper am Rhein in Düsseldorf. And one of them was a ballet with Petrushka and the Rite of Spring. And I do love to look at the dancer, and they are beautiful to watch. And I tell you that the Rite of Spring is maybe the most frustrating experience artistically I had in my life because the score is so difficult that actually I couldn't enjoy what I was seeing in front of me. I was really trying to conduct rightly the score. But that said, so I had this experience with those 2 ballets. Pulcinella, it happened that it's my very first time conducting the piece ever this week. I never did this piece before. So I hope indeed in the future I will maybe do it as well as the ballet. And Lebisch, I would really love to do this piece. I was actually very envious when you said you will do it. It's very rarely done. Be it in a ballet or in a concert version, it's a rare piece, and I'm so delighted that Boston will get concerts of it, and soon a revival of the piece as a ballet. And I really hope I could do more ballet. There is, I have to say something really, which is very disturbing sometimes in the career we have now, is that in this golden era, one of the reasons Paris got such a golden era is because all the arts, as you said, were mixing. All the artists were seeing each other, and that's what created, I think, this famous, amazing moment of creation. Right now, in our world, things are very much specialized, and in a way, if you are a symphony conductor, it's hard sometimes to be considered an opera conductor. And if you are an opera conductor, it's sometimes difficult to be considered a ballet conductor. And this is, of course, wrong. I mean, a good conductor, I hope, should be able to do all of these different activities at the same level, and there should not be any etiquette, any pigeonhole, where it says you're ballet conductor only or you're symphony conductor only. So to answer briefly your question, I dream to do indeed more ballet. It's difficult, but I hope I will have opportunities to do some more ballets, and especially those great pieces of the Ballets Russes.
Mikko, do you have anything to say about that too?
Well, I would love to see you conduct some of the performances. Maybe I will revive a whole evening of Diaghilev works, and Le Biche is one of them, and we can have you conduct.
Let's
for
call
us.
my agent.
Hey,
Okay.
it'd be a great,
Okay.
it'd be a great moment for Boston.
I'm serious.
I read does anybody else think that's a good idea? I think that's a great idea. I read, I think this morning's New York Times, a long ballet review which made no mention whatever of whether there was any music. It talked about the ballet and what happened on stage and so forth. There was no indication of whether there was any music at all. Interestingly, a lot of these Diaghilev ballets seem to have begun with the commission of the music from a composer. And then a choreographer, perhaps there is a staff choreographer, you know who it's going to be. Then the choreography is made, and then it's set on the dancers, so that it really is the kind of collaboration that, although it may have existed at first, a lot of ballet companies don't make mention of the fact that well, a lot of people actually play recorded music and that kind of thing, and it's sad, but maybe inevitable. Nevertheless, this period that you were just mentioning is the place where the music and the dance are almost inseparable. They come into existence together and feed off of each other.
And visual art and everything.
Well, the music is the backbone of dance. There is no dance without the music. As I also say that everyone is a dancer. Your heartbeat is music. You take a couple steps, there's a coordination. We have so many coordinations, so everybody should relate to music and dance. The different, more refined forms of that is a process of elimination. We come with, 3.5 million coordinations, and then we just leave the essential at the end, a little bit like Michelangelo. He had this big piece of marble, and then he took the unnecessary out and left the David.
Wonderful.
If it were that easy.
There is one piece, though, which I love. 2 years ago, I did it in Philadelphia. It's called Obad by Poulenc. And it's a rare piece which is meant to be performed on a concert stage, but with dancer. It's called a choreographic concerto, and it's for 19 instruments and piano solo, and I did it actually a few times as it should be, so with dancers on stage and musicians on stage, and so we all together there, and that's a great reunion again of the art. That's the best we can do.
What do you think? Are there other questions? Sorry, we ran. Yes. What about dancing? You say in the documentary? Yeah, the film last night, yes. There was a wonderful film here last night called Ballets Russes. I don't know if anybody besides this gentleman were able to be here. It's a wonderful, touching thing, too, because it has people who had danced 50 years ago talking about what it was like. But they were dancing to symphonies and other kinds. So is there any kind of music that's sort of not suitable for dance? Was that sort of the question? Is it okay to dance to symphonies?
Well, the very first symphonic ballet was choreographed in the Ballets Russes era by Massin Le Présage to the Beethoven 7th Symphony. And next year, actually we are announcing our next year's season next week. I'll give you a little insight. Our season will open with the Mahler's 3rd Symphony, choreography by John Neumeier. So there are lots of examples of that, but not all the time. There are some major undertakings, and I welcome when choreographers take major challenges. I think it's just really interesting.
So for you, there's no music that's not liable to a good choreographer?
Well, I would say that there's some music where I feel the music has already, there's no space, no oxygen, that it already tells you everything. And sometimes it's very difficult to match music like that. And but in general, it's a little bit just, if you have the choreographer who sees it and hears it, let them do it. I have seen a couple times in my life somebody tells me, oh, they have this idea, and I'm like, oh my God, I will support this person. He's a brilliant artist. I'm a friend. Yes, good luck. I'm like, yes, it's going to be interesting. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be disaster. And then this individual sees a way through it, like absolute strike of genius. Mats X Giselle. When he was telling me initially, I was a young dancer, and I asked what music he was going to use, and he told me he was going to use a dam, and I was like, I was scared. And now
It's a classic. Yeah.
it is incredible,
Yes, yep.
incredible. So
Yes, anything is possible in the right artistic hands. Other questions? We're going to hear tonight the amazing two-piano version of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. We're going to hear the second half of the Rite of Spring. Maybe you remember, here's what Stravinsky's sketches look like. I'm sure you can make a lot of sense of that. Right across the middle is the thing that goes bum, 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 bum. Bump, that amazing dance, but that comes in the first half of the Rite of Spring. Here's how you develop those sketches into a kind of something or other, fleshed out a little bit, but it's not an orchestration, it's just a larger thing. But I'm sure you recognize this part, which you will hear. There on the right-hand page is, you remember that part, the part where the dinosaurs chase along. And here is the score. This is still again written out in Igor Stravinsky's hand. When I look at this, I don't know if you can see the detail. When I look at this, I think how long it would take me to write down that many notes. I don't mean compose the notes, I mean just simply write the things down. It's astounding to think that anybody could do that and compose them at the same time. This is the same passage there. This is the glorification of the chosen victim. And you see those little blue numbers written across the middle there to help a conductor. This may be to help Pierre Monteux get through these very irregular rhythms. You'll remember, I think, here's what part of the two-piano arrangement looks like. This is actually the score that has choreographic notes. This is the score that belonged to Miriam Romberg and has notes that were made, choreographic notes that were made during the first production. So you'll remember the way the second half of the Rite of Spring goes, I'm sure. It begins with that very eerie kind of I don't know, Star Wars kind of music. Forgive me, John Williams, but it gave a lot of impetus to a lot of exotic movie music, and moves on and it depicts the mystic circle of the young women of the tribe who do this a funny dance in the moonlight, and this dance, among other things, chooses one of their number who then gets shoved into the middle of the circle, and they do that wild dance around her. This is the part that where the dinosaurs operate, and this is the really loud bit, and the part that Valentine Gross was illustrating in that pastel. After that, the ancestors are invoked. The ancestors, as we Slavs all know, are actually bears. So you have ancestors in bear skins who appear on the stage. And then the young woman who's been standing there, trembling, erupts into life in the famous final sacrificial dance that begins with one amazing chord. And then this dance goes on and on and on, getting more and more severe and actually going down in pitch towards the end until finally, as you know, she dies. She's lifted up by the ancestors. And there's a final crash, which Stravinsky put in at the last moment. I'm told that Diaghilev said, you can't just go with a flute. You can't do that. You got to go boom. So he said, okay, and wrote a boom at the very end of the score. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But we're going to have the pleasure, I hope you'll join me in listening to our performers, who are Jin-Uk Kim and Hana Byun from the New England Conservatory of Music, and I hope they're here and will come out now. right there, because let us thank you officially. On behalf of all of us, let us thank these terrific musicians. Let me also thank Maestro Stéphane Denève and Mikko Nissinen, director of the Boston Ballet, for being here with us tonight. I've had a great time. I've never learned so much or been thrilled so much by being that close to the Rite of Spring as I have been tonight. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks to everybody.
The equivalent would be a German architect practicing in Germany, coming and building a building in America. That happens very frequently right now, but that's the examples you gave are really of migration architects, which I think has always been part of life. People migrated, and Aldo Gergola went to Australia to do the parliament, stayed there and became an Australian architect. I think that today the reality is that architects from a whole wide variety of countries, although I acknowledge mostly Europe and the United States, practice all over the world.